It's also a great honor to have read recently the interview in Brazil Wire with the Secretary of Urban Development, Fernando de Melo Franco, in 2014, that New York is just like Sao Paulo, where people are pushing to reclaim the public space. Oops, sorry, did I? Yeah, okay, sorry. Before I talk about how design trust shapes public space and the public domain, I'd like to know who's in the audience. I think similar to my husband yesterday, asking you, who is an architect? Would you raise your hand? Do you consider yourself a planner? Planners? Landscape architects? I know you don't make this distinction, but maybe you love plants and the topography. Okay. And then community activists. Any? Yes, a few. And you're all students, or yeah? Yeah, okay. You're not very loud, you people. Okay. So, in the urban age, nearly 70%, you know the statistic, of the world, because you're all students, good students, nearly 70% of the world's population will live in urban centers by 2050. New York City's population, just to give you a sense, is about 8.5 million. In the next 20 years, will grow to 9.5, so very small, but the region has 23 million people. I feel like we can barely keep up with Sao Paulo, which is nearly 22 already. So, in a crowded metropolis, every square meter of real estate is like gold. The Design Trust believes that the public space, the spaces we share, the spaces in between, are the heart and lifeblood of the city. The Design Trust, I will tell you a little bit about our mission. We're a 20-year-old, citizen-led, I think you would call it an NGO, we call it a nonprofit, dedicated to unlocking the potential of New York City's public space. So we've been doing it for 20 years. Typically, government has taken the lead in the public realm. So your expectation is that, why didn't the government take care of that sidewalk or that street? Now community groups, so it's the top-down, and now the community groups, the bottom-up, are really wanting a stronger role. So the Design Trust, our nonprofit organization, does a call for projects and a call for fellows every few years. An independent jury selects one or two projects proposed by city agencies or community organizations. And we connect people with government and policymakers. And also we build authority. So yesterday we talked about building authority. When do you have a strong voice? It's built through a collaborative process. And so we have stakeholders, advisory groups, community funders. They all come together to problem seek, sitting around the table, problem seeking, and problem solving together for better public space. So here are 4 ways we influence public policy and create impact. We changed the system. We've developed a series of high-performance guidelines, a precursor to the local law and Plan YC, now 1 NYC, with the New York City Department of Design and Construction. These guidelines changed how the city designs, operates, and maintains public space, and to create a more sustainable and resilient city. Here you see Brooklyn Bridge Park, right next, that green space right next to the Brooklyn Bridge, which reclaimed an old warehouse pier for a new waterfront park. This park survived Superstorm Sandy, a really big, huge storm event, and it also served multiple purposes. As you heard from my husband Charles, it saved us from the flood. And also, it serves as sports and recreation space. And it also, because it's green, cleans the air. Here we have producing a replicable model. The World's Park, one of our projects, pioneered this community design school, a new form of civic engagement and stewardship for Flushing Meadow Corona Park. Here's our fellow, Sarah Ligis, leading a session of the 10-week-long school for 23 community advisors. The school is a replicable model for community planning, applicable to a range of public spaces, and I'll tell you a little more later. Here we are at the High Line, creating a catalyst. Our feasibility study called Reclaiming the High Line, this saved this abandoned elevated rail line, and built support for one of the city's most popular public spaces. I believe they receive 6 million visitors a year in this space, and more than the Metropolitan Museum receives. So people now could envision reusing this aging infrastructure and think it's cool. And what we know is that everybody now wants a High Line. And then creating a constituency. So I talked about creating a collaborative process. Our Made in Midtown project, in partnership with the Council of Fashion Designers in America, built a constituency of fashion designers, showroom operators, suppliers, property owners, all having different perspectives to advocate for the relevance of this thriving research and development hub. So if you're a young fashion designer, you could go across the street to a manufacturer and find out how to make a garment. So similar to my shirt today, made in New York, you could do this all in one place. So important. So we persuaded the city to withdraw a controversial rezoning proposal that would have dispersed all of the fashion designers, the manufacturers, and the showrooms. So here we are. I'd like to give you more detail on how 5 recent projects catalyzed public space. So going more in depth on the High Line, and I just received an email from Robert Hammond today, how did the High Line Park become a park? And this elevated viaduct is, let's see, do I have a map? Is there a map? Yes. This elevated viaduct is 2.74 kilometers and 2.7 hectares on the west side of Manhattan. So you see it here. Let's see. No, I don't have a pointer, sorry. But you see the green line there. And in 1999, our mayor, this is what it looked like. You saw the after before. Mayor Giuliani proposed tearing down the High Line, built in the 1930s and was abandoned in the 1980s. It transported raw materials and finished goods to and from the city. Here's Robert and Josh David. In late 2000, these two gentlemen and Friends of the High Line, a coalition of business owners, residents, and civic groups, advocated to save the rail, and they partnered with the Design Trust to create the feasibility study to save it. The Design Trust evaluated 3 reuse options: demolition and redevelopment, so tearing it down, reuse as a rail line, and public open space. We studied local zoning, current land use, community needs, and we held public workshops with civic leaders, so with elected officials. The public open space was regarded as the most useful, most valuable. So in our city in New York, every politician, real estate owner thinks of highest and best use. So for them, highest and best use is the dollar value. How much money are we going to make from this property? Well, we think about, okay, so what's the dollar value of this park? And so if it sparked financial activity, raising property values around the High Line, and generated tax revenue for the city. So here in 2002, Mayor Bloomberg saved the High Line from demolition, and the city rezoned the area in 2006. I think Charles talked about it a little bit, encouraging development, protecting neighborhood character, and existing art galleries, and also the High Line itself. The Parks Department hired architects Diller, Scofidio, Renfro, and landscape architects James Corner, field operations, to create a master plan and design a sustainable open space. Here you have the High Line. So the High Line received city, state, and federal funds that attracted more than $2 billion in private sector investment. So here we had public sector and private sector working together. All 31 private parcels nearby are now in construction as hotels, residences, and other commercial buildings. The High Line is city-owned, remains city-owned. However, it's operated under a license agreement with the Friends of the High Line, who raised nearly 90% of the operating funds. And at the south end, the very south end of the High Line, we have the Whitney Museum, which opened in 2015. It is 18,600 square meters, 200,000 square feet in its building, and adjoins the park's maintenance facility and also the meatpacking district. So a very unusual mix of uses. So here's trucks from the meatpacking district under the elevated. There's a vast amount of space that sits under this park, and how could we waste space? How can we better use this space in the city? So the High Line inspired our latest project called Under the Elevated and captured people's imaginations with its possibilities. We realized space under elevated infrastructure is more important than the upper deck. It's the space that connects us all. So L space, as we call it, is one of the city's last frontiers. These dark, noisy, and neglected spaces divide and disrupt and blight our neighborhoods. So our photourbanism fellows' images show how this infrastructure shapes a neighborhood and how it's already used. Here we have salsa dancing, we had hip hop, and other activities. Much of this infrastructure was built over 60 to 100 years ago. The transit, city and state Department of Transportation need to develop new strategies for how to maintain and reconstruct or demolish this infrastructure. And for us, it's a multi-jurisdictional challenge. So our fellows focused on policy, participatory design, photourbanism, urban design, and graphic design. I think you noted our little L under the L. So graphic design really shaped and gave a brand to our project. We partnered with the New York City Department of Transportation to reclaim and use spaces under elevated bridges, highways, subway, and rail lines. And Susanna Drake, as you see here, who spoke earlier this week to you, was our urban design fellow. These spaces, So the Department of Transportation is the primary public agency who manages these spaces under the elevated. And they advocated within their very complex agencies and also with other public agencies for our project. So I'm sure you have similar conditions where you have the silo effect, where one department doesn't talk to the other department, and they could all be working on the same project. Oh, this map is not very clear, but it gives you a sense of there's over 70 million miles, 70 million square feet. No, 17 million square feet, 660 hectares of space under this transit infrastructure. And it's almost double the size of Central Park. So we're looking at other uses, how we can use the space. Innovative uses like electrical vehicle charging, or skateboard parks, or green markets, or studio space, places to do noisy things. And our fellows, because it's such a vast space, created these typologies where you can, better understand this massive infrastructure. So we had landing, in a park situation, under a rail, which is a trestle, highways, clusters, clovers for highways, and span across bridges. We studied precedents for L spaces under the under the FDR Highway, under the Manhattan and Brooklyn bridges, in Flushing Meadow Corona Park. Lighting L spaces was a big challenge. Lighting is designed for cars, not for pedestrians. I don't know about your traffic engineers, but they design for cars in New York. And we suggested adding accent lighting. So here you see some brighter lighting. At crossings or painting the structure, a lighter color with reflective paint. We also looked at art, what art can do for activating the space and bringing the community there. These spaces also serve as multifunctional spaces. So green infrastructure is a critical part of use for this space. And here's Susanna Drake's test bioswale to clean the air and capture the stormwater from the elevated highway. We have millions of gallons of polluted water just flowing into our waterways. And so we're trying to retain the water here with the planting materials so that in this public space becomes productive. Then we also we created 2 pop-up installations. Sorry, did I skip? No, that's right. We created 2 pop-up installations designed by our fellows to test what the community wanted in Chinatown and in the South Bronx. In Chinatown, we collaborated with the local development corporation, Chinatown Partnership, and they linked us to the community, and you can see them telling us what they wanted under the elevated. Here's Susanna and Chat Treviso. So we created a gateway to Chinatown, a community bulletin board in English and in Chinese for the groups to post events on colorful tags, to tell the community what kind of program they were offering, a dance program, a green market, and then there was red accent lighting to create a more attractive space. And there was also an informational map. And the community also continued to tell us what they wanted, light over darkness. Our second pop-up was in the South Bronx under the 2-5 subway line. We collaborated with the Women's Housing Economic Development Corporation on the Boogie Down booth. Bronx residents told us what they wanted. Under the elevated, they wanted bright colors and better lighting and masking the noise and seating. So we created a turquoise-colored canopy with solar-powered lighting, a directional speaker playing jazz and hip-hop music from the Bronx, and seating near a bus stop. So it didn't attach to the subways, to the transit infrastructure. So, and here's opening day with hip-hop group Circa 95. The amount of media attention, so the press that came, really convinced our project partner, the Department of Transportation, Commissioner, to create a permanent L-space program and prototype for this booth. So our key recommendations was to create an L-Space program, a formal program at Department of Transportation that provides a one-stop, so to deal with the entire network of spaces. So the agency has needs and initiated projects, and if you, the public, wanted to come and propose a project, you could go to them and they would serve as your kind of ambassador to other public agencies and also to help you make your project happen. So our next phase is 2 pilots. One is in Sunset Park and the other is in the Rockaways. And they will test treatment under a highway and under a rail line. You see under the highway, under the Gowanus Expressway at 36th Street in Sunset Park, will create a safer crossing, where has 22,000 workers crossing every day, and a better connection to the waterfront. And we are also collaborating with a private partner, private developer, of the nearby Industry City, an incubator, and a startup space. Our next pilot will be under the A line, and it is with a local partner, Rockaway Waterfront Alliance, and the Department of Transportation. We'll test how we can provide car-free open space and green infrastructure strategies, and create a stewardship model to connect a 5-mile stretch from downtown Far Rockaway in the easternmost part, what's east for you, east, to the west, to Beach 108th Street. Okay, going to the World's Park. So Flushing Meadow Corona Park hosted the 1939 and 1964 World's Fairs, but it has not been reconfigured since then. We selected this project, the World's Park, to reconnect this park with its diverse neighborhood in Queens. Similar to Sao Paulo, you have a very diverse city. Our partners in New York City were New York City Parks, Queens Museum, who proposed a community design school and exhibition of ideas for the park. The museum had strong ties, strong relationships with their local artists and neighbors, and our fellows focused on participatory design, design education, and community organizing. And they planned the school curriculum. So the community organizing fellow knew who cared about the park passionately and identified key stakeholders to participate in the school. Here's our 23 community advisors from neighborhood groups, schools, libraries, churches, synagogues, park advocates. These lay people were from 16 to 70 years old. They spoke 7 languages, including an architect and a mother and 2 mothers with children with special needs. The sessions were held in Chinese, English, and Spanish. The Community Design School met at Queens Museum bi-weekly in the evening. They learned about park history, the value of design, developed ideas for the park and for the exhibition. Here's a sample of 4 lessons from the 8 school sessions: seeing the park differently, understanding spatial justice, considering others' experiences, and lining up partnerships. Over 100 people attended the exhibition opening at Queens Museum. You are here creating a new approach to civic participation in the World's Park. Now, several of these advisors are leading the Community Advisory Board, and they also sit on the stewardship organization, the Alliance, to help maintain the park with the park administrator. Five-Borough Farm. Sorry, we're almost to the end. Five-Borough Farm. So, how many of you do gardening? Gardening? Any of you do gardening? A handful of you do gardening. Okay, Five-Borough Farm was a 3-phase study of New York City's urban agriculture in partnership with Added Value, a non-profit community farm. Our goal was to create a citywide policy to strengthen and expand farming and gardening in New York City. Urban agriculture involves many city agencies, so I was talking about the silo again before, right? We have parks, we have sanitation, we have health, we have small business, we have economic development. They're all doing urban agriculture in some shape or form, but not talking to each other. So we worked with farmers and gardeners who grow fruits and vegetables in the city to create a strong and active voice for urban agriculture with city agencies. So here's a rooftop farm called the Brooklyn Grange, and you can see the Manhattan skyline in the distance. Our project partners connected us to different urban agriculture stakeholders and policymakers. Added value on the left, connected us to community gardens. They engaged in youth development, so working with young people in farming. New York City Parks and their Green Thumb program, who supervise over 600 community gardens. And they helped us create an urban agriculture task force so that all of those agencies could come and talk to each other. And then Farming Concrete, who had roots in the community and a project website that we helped use to reach over 100 farmers and gardeners to collect data in the city. Here's our fellows on the 3 phases of the project. So we involve a lot of people in our projects. Our many fellows focus on different aspects of urban agriculture policy, sustainability and food and health, and also visualization and communication through photography, graphics, and videography. The fellows helped broaden our outreach within the academic community and the urban agriculture, the farming and gardening community. We used our fellows' photos to show policymakers and the public how urban agriculture takes place in the city, and on rooftops, next to subways, in vacant lots, in schoolyards, and in all corners of the city. We also use maps. Here's some maps from our 5-borough farm book showing almost 700 farms and gardens. Now 900 farms and gardens produce food in New York City. Most are concentrated in the Bronx. You see the concentration of green dots at the top. And then in the middle, you see the concentration of farms and gardens in Brooklyn. Maps are great visualization tools to show our government officials the level of activity and programs. And I think Selva and Gregor yesterday used a lot of different tools that are good with elected officials. Another tool for community engagement was stakeholder workshops, especially at the beginning of our projects. We invited farmers, gardeners, botanical gardens to sit together to identify key issues and concerns about urban agriculture. We interviewed gardeners in their gardens to see how they were growing and what they were growing. These places are not only where the community grows together, but they also make strong friendships. We did not find any quality data on urban agriculture across the U.S. We created a metrics framework I wore her out. Okay. We created a metrics framework to measure the benefits beyond food. So here we're looking at health benefits, social benefits, environmental benefits, and economic benefits. The Design Trust made 30 policy recommendations that will accomplish 5 goals: formalizing government support for urban agriculture, integrating urban ag into city policy and programs, identifying innovative opportunities to build urban agriculture into the cityscape, and address race and class disparities in New York City. We have a lot of hipsters who have taken over farming and gardening. The people who have been farming and gardening since the 1970s are really, they're still there, plugging away. why are all the hipsters getting the attention, right? Yeah. Okay, so to support our recommendations, we developed our data collection toolkit with the farmers and gardeners. They told us what matters to them: school curriculum, growing on small plots, creating more soil and compost, getting volunteers for their garden, what they already count and why, and good things happening in their garden. So gardeners wanted a simple tool, and so we created a loose leaf binder with pages to photocopy, to get wet and dirty, and to measure their activity, not their smartphone that will get wet and dirty. So that is better. We also created a video series to show as many people as possible how to use the data collection toolkit. And we also taught the Department of Sanitation to use the toolkit. We call it training the trainers so that they can spread the word to their network. And we've now got the web portal. With Farming Concrete, we have created the barn. So farmers and gardeners, we have 306 farmers and gardeners who are plugging in their data, entering their data, and in 51 other cities besides New York City, and in 6 countries. So we hope some farmers and gardeners from Sao Paulo will join our network. Yeah, farmers, you can just go to farmingconcrete.org. So farmers and gardeners enter their data, and they can see how they are doing. So they get reports back. So not only are they putting in the data, but they're also getting reports back saying, hey, your tomato crop compared to somebody else's tomato crop is doing fabulously well. Well, why don't you share your idea on what you're doing so well with someone else? You can do it through the website. And we also want government officials to pay attention, so we've created the mill, and so elected officials can look at this website and get the same reports and see what's happening, what good things are happening in our city. So my last project, laying the groundwork, is from 2014. We selected this with our independent jury. We like bright colors, you can see. We created this with our Housing Preservation Development Department. A set of design guidelines for how ground floor space in mixed-use affordable housing can really activate the street, make a vibrant streetscape. And neighborhood retail is crucial to this experience because, as you know, the ground floor retail faces our city's largest public space, which is our sidewalks, right? And Mayor de Blasio's administration, our current mayor, has an unprecedented investment in affordable housing. He wants to create 80,000 new units. So of 200,000 preserved and created, 80,000 will be new. And so think about 13 to 15 new neighborhoods that will have this new ground floor retail and new shopping. Most of them don't have access to supermarkets, to banks, to pharmacies. So, we want to avoid having vacant storefronts. So here again, we work with our fellows who are our private sector experts doing the research and developing the guidelines. We selected an engineering fellow, graphic design fellow, and also architecture fellows. In stakeholder workshops, we brought together 68 architects, developers, city agencies, community development corporations, business improvement districts to tell us about quality retail and ground floor uses. The fellows' draft was circulated amongst these knowledgeable experts in the field once they'd done their research, and we wanted to hear their views on what created successful retail. Our peer review drew a broad spectrum of opinions. Some of them were good, some of them were critical. We strongly considered all of these comments for our final document. Here's an example of a well-designed storefront and how it can activate the street. Here in Sao Paulo, you have such good climate that you have so many of these open-air situations. But for us in the winter, it's not such a good idea. Okay, this is summer. And here we have our 87-page publication. After this exhaustive research, the team hopes this unique publication will prove to be kind of the go-to resource for architects, developers, nonprofits, community groups, and public officials to continue to create vibrant streetscape and livable neighborhoods. So we want to work to achieve a lasting impact, and therefore we also hold public programs similar to your seminar and post-project training with architects and public officials. So in closing, I just would like to say, public space is the glue that holds our city together and makes it worth living in. And this is a quote from our former Department of Transportation Commissioner, Jeanette Sadiq-Khan. So thank you very much, and I understand we will take questions later. Yes, thank you.